I knew that it was probably going to.
13 Action News begins with breaking news.
We interrupt your regular programming to bring you unrest in Las Vegas. This is night 3 of protests. Now you're taking a live look at downtown Las Vegas where hundreds are protesting. You can see a massive group there. They are demanding justice after the death of George Floyd at the hands of a Minneapolis police officer. Protests are happening across the country tonight. The National Guard being deployed in 8 states. Many demonstrations becoming violent. Reno now becoming the first city in Nevada to implement a curfew. This after protesters broke the windows of City Hall and got into that building. Now here in Las Vegas, we have live team coverage. Austin Carter and Ross DiMattei are standing by. But first, let's get things started with Kalyna Astrinos, who's standing by at Fremont and 8th Street. And Kalyna, I understand that officers have actually been giving warnings to protesters out there about unlawful assembly. So tell me what you are seeing and what you are hearing.
Yes, I feel like we've actually been hearing that for the past 45 minutes or so. They've given several warnings, just telling people to walk back down Fremont Street, go a different direction, make sure they kind of move out of the way. But if you can see this vantage point that we have, you can see how close we are with this crowd and how close they are up to the officers here. Now, for a while, it was actually very, very quiet. There weren't a lot of people here. Everyone went the other direction. But then all of a sudden, I want to say about 15 minutes or so ago, a huge, huge crowd. I mean, this is hundreds, if not thousands of people that are down here right now. And those officers are continuing to make warnings, telling them that they need to move back. Now, the group of protesters that you're seeing here right now, I've heard everything from them chanting, "Say his name, George Floyd," chanting "Black Lives Matter." A few minutes ago, they were all taking a knee, and they were actually also urging officers to take a knee, standing in front of them, asking them and chanting, take a knee, say his name, George Floyd. So this is obviously a fluid situation. Emotions are high here. And again, this is all in response to the injustice that these people have been feeling for years and years and years. And they want to make their voices heard. Actually, just let a little girl just go by me right now. So like I mentioned before, this is a very diverse group of people that are here that are all supporting the same exact cause. We haven't seen any violence at all right now. It's just been chanting and just officers asking and urging them to kind of move back. So we'll keep an eye on this fluid situation, but right now everything is still peaceful and everything is still moving what it seems like in the right direction, with everyone just remaining calm. Jackie, I'll send it back to you.
Yeah, Kalyna, thank you for that report. I understand last night that protesters they received several messages, several warnings from police before people were being arrested. Austin Carter standing by now. And Austin, you are among the protesters as well. What are you seeing and what are you hearing?
Yeah, well, Jackie, we saw a total of 3 water bottles being thrown from this area. One literally just moments before you took our live shot here. So I'm trying to figure out the best move for my photographer and I, safety at this moment. Now you can see right here in front of us, if you can make it through, it looks like there's a couple lines of people standing here along Fremont Street. And then right on that other side there, you see those officers in that tactical gear. We're not sure if maybe these officers are trying to push folks back. But like I said, we did just see some water balls flying through this area towards those officers. Of course, some protesters seeing that, getting very upset, screaming at people not to get violent, not to throw anything. So we're not exactly sure what's going on down here, if they are going to start pushing people back. But you can hear a lot of the screaming and shouting coming from these protesters here, telling people to get moved and to get back. So we're not exactly sure, again, what the plan is here, where those officers might be trying to move people. But we are seeing a strong line, a resilient line of these protesters making their mark here along Fremont Street and not backing down here, what it seems, to those officers. So, yeah, luckily we haven't seen any more of those water bottles or any items being thrown at those officers. Definitely don't want things to get violent at all, but we're definitely seeing people here who are upset, maybe reaching that point of anger here. So, again, we're just seeing a wall of Metro Police officers just feet away from us here. You are seeing some of those protesters walking away. We're going to walk a little bit closer here to see if we can get a better angle here. So yeah, well, it looks like right here, that line of officers there, you can see them in that tactical gear. I'd say they're about 20 feet ahead of us here. And when we saw those water balls being thrown, they were right over to our right there, where you see a couple of those signs there coming from that general direction and then heading towards those officers. So,
yeah, Austin.
All right. Hey, Jackie.
Yeah, we're going to get over to Ross DiMattei, who right now is in Chopper 13, kind of giving us that bird's eye view of the march. And it's interesting because Austin was showing sort of a static shot of protesters standing up near the gate of the Fremont Street Experience. But right now, marchers are still walking, Ross.
Yeah, Jackie, good evening to you as we say hello to you for the first time from inside of Chopper 13, where we are now once again flying over downtown Las Vegas and this group of protesters. We did have to go back and refuel briefly, but we are now back in the air tracking this group for you again. I want to give you the shot. Jose, if we could take this this shot we have of the group of protesters. They are on the move once again. It's been interesting to watch this group stopping at certain points and now again on the move as you see the D there. They are now on 3rd and Carson, or at least they were at last check, but this group is moving quickly once again and seems to be moving south on 3rd Street, I believe. But again, no idea where they're heading exactly, but we have seen this kind of sporadic travel pattern from this group throughout the night as they've zigzagged starting on Fremont Street and then heading south on Las Vegas Boulevard and kind of zigzagging, like I said, west and then south and then turning again. But again, they're passing the D, heading south on 3rd Street. We're going to keep a close eye on them from here in Chopper 13, high above this scene as it continues to play out. Jackie?
Yeah, Ross, between your shot from Chopper 13 and what we're seeing from Austin and Kalyna, there is just a massive group of people in downtown Las Vegas tonight making their voices heard. And Kalyna, I know that you had mentioned that you'd been hearing from officers several times over the last 45 minutes or so that they were asking people to disperse, and they were saying that people were going to be arrested for unlawful assembly. They were giving those warnings, which is something, of course, that we heard on the Las Vegas Strip last night. Give us a sense of what's going on right now. Have you seen anyone actually being arrested, taken into custody yet?
So, Jackie, we've actually kind of moved our spot from where we were. It got a little too tight and a little too crowded for us, but we're moving in another direction because we just saw about 20 officers walking down the street, walking down 8th Street. You can see to my right the line of police vehicles here as well. But as we walk down this direction, it looks like it is the opposite side of where we were first standing, where we first showed you what was going on. So we still have a huge line of officers. We saw water bottles being thrown at the officers as well. But for the most part, it hasn't necessarily been violent at all. It's still been very peaceful. But emotions are obviously high as we continue to walk toward this crowd that's on the opposite side here on Fremont, on the opposite side of that sign that where you just saw Austin Carter at. So we still have a fluid situation like we mentioned, but so far we have just heard the warning signs that we told you about earlier, just urging people to step back, go in a different direction, warning them to, again, just move out of the way. And like you mentioned yesterday, we know that the only reason why they arrested people, they were saying on air and in a couple posts that they arrested people who were violating the law and making situations unsafe. So far, though, we have seen a very quiet situation for the most part. We've just been hearing people chanting, again, George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, and just really making their voices heard. So, again, we're just approaching the scene right now. We're down on Fremont and 8th. On the opposite side of where you saw Austin Carter. You can see the massive amounts of police vehicles here and also the huge crowd on the opposite side of where the officers are. So it looks like we have two lines here of officers. One where Austin Carter is, where the big crowd is, and then we also have a huge crowd on this side of the street as well on 8th and Fremont, where a lot of the police officer vehicles are kind of positioned around and everything as well. But again, it just seems like we're just hearing a lot of chanting, say his name, Black Lives Matter, George Floyd. So we'll continue to watch the situation for you.
Yeah, Kalyna, thank you so much. We definitely heard from leaders from different sects in Las Vegas before we began the broadcast tonight. They all were calling for peaceful protests tonight. They did not want to see vandalism or violence happen in our city. Let's get to Ross DiMattei once again in Chopper 13, giving us that look from the sky tonight. So, Ross, it looks like the protesters right now are turning the corner. Can you give us an idea of where exactly they are?
Yeah, so Jackie, right now we're taking a look overhead from Lewis and 3rd Street. We had seen the group traveling south on 3rd Street for a while, but they have made that 90-degree turn onto Lewis, and I believe that they are heading east on Lewis, but that is the regional justice center there with the palm trees on the left, and you see that size of that group, just a massive amount of protesters, hundreds at least, heading now down Lewis Street, so Lewis Avenue, excuse me. But we have basically been seeing this group stay within that area where the regional justice center is, Clark County Detention Center, just that general area of downtown Las Vegas. Like I've mentioned before, hasn't really been a charted path that they've been taking, but they've been staying in that same general area of downtown, stopping occasionally. But as you can see, when they mobilize, they really move, and they're moving at a good pace now down Lewis Avenue. Jackie?
Absolutely, and just to build in some context for tonight's protest, of course, this is now the 3rd night of protests. A couple nights ago, much smaller group. Last night, large group on the Las Vegas
Anyone
Strip.
watching on Facebook, that is, in fact, a car traveling along with those protesters.
Oh, wow. Okay. A car among the protesters. Let's hope that stays safe, that everyone stays safe around there. Let's get to Kalyna once again. And Kalyna, it sounds like you are seeing a lineup of officers right now, and maybe some protesters who are facing off with those officers. What are you hearing from people?
Yeah, so you can see the line right here, right in front of me. It looks to be about 20, 30 officers here just in line. Now, the people that we have on this side, it's not as big as a crowd as we saw on the other side. Everyone, again, being peaceful, but I'm going to kind of move myself across the street so I can get a better vantage point. But we do have several officers here. We have several police vehicles blocking this roadway here. So this is spilling on into the streets once again, and we are just seeing them being peaceful. This side of the crowd is actually maintaining their distance from officers. The other side, where you saw Austin Carter and where we were earlier, they were right in front of the officers, directly in front, making eye contact, chanting at them to say George Floyd's name, also chanting to take a knee. On this side, though, it's a little bit different. It's less of a crowd. There are several officers still, however.
Okay, Kalyna, we're gonna move on. Kalyna, we're gonna move on to Austin Carter right now. And Austin, we just saw protesters running. So what is happening there?
Guys, can you hear me? Jackie, you got me?
Yes, Austin, we have you.
Okay. So what happened? They just started throwing things.
Yeah.
People just got they're throwing water bottles now. I'm looking for a photographer. Oh my God. Okay. I'm looking for my photographer right now. We got separated. We'll start running.
Okay. Austin,
what do you see? I can't tell you what.
Your mic is cutting out right now. We can't exactly hear you. What I think I heard you say was that people were throwing water bottles at you. Please be safe out there. We're going to get back to Ross DiMattei now, who is live in Chopper 13. And right now, I'm not sure exactly what street we're looking at, but it looks like protesters, again, are just on a steady move. And Ross, they have been on the move now for more than 2 hours, because this protest started around 7 o'clock this evening.
That's exactly right, Jackie. And it's really hard to tell who is leading the charge here with this movement, but this is the front of the pack. And we have been seeing throughout the course of these past 2 hours that when this group starts moving, led by whomever that is, they really do have a solid pace. And they're now continuing to walk down South Casino Center Boulevard. They're actually heading north on Casino Center Boulevard, possibly heading back towards the Fremont Street area. This has been the general route that we've seen. It kind of started at downtown Las Vegas and specifically Container Park, and then headed down Fremont Street and then towards Las Vegas Boulevard, and eventually making a somewhat of a circle and coming back along Casino Center Boulevard. and then working back towards Fremont Street. So that's been the general pattern, but again, no telling exactly where these protesters are going. But we've seen them kind of space out a little bit more as we see some of the crowd that's a little bit more spaced out than what we've seen when they start to stop and come together. But still, this crowd is on the move and now heading north along Casino Center Boulevard. We're tracking them from Chopper 13 up here in the sky over downtown Las Vegas.
Yeah, Ross, it's a little bit hard to tell, but from what I saw on Las Vegas Boulevard last night, those protesters making their way up and down the strip, and what that how that group evolved throughout the day. It looks to me like this group tonight in downtown Las Vegas is much larger. Would you say that's the case from your vantage point?
Absolutely, and I was not out on the strip last night, but I know my photographer Jose was, and we were talking while we were refueling, and he mentioned to me that if he had to put a guess on it, he thought it was about 4, maybe even 5 times bigger tonight, this group gathering in downtown Las Vegas compared to the group we saw on the strip. And we all know what the outcome was with the protests on the Las Vegas Strip last night.
Absolutely,
and,
Ross. We're going to actually get
size.
over to, Ross, we're going to get over to Kalyna Astrinos right now. Kalyna, it sounds like you have a fairly active scene where you are.
It is a very active scene right now. We just saw a bunch of people running down the alley here. It looks like they are throwing water bottles in the air over at the officers right now. The officers are asking them to move back, urging them to move back right now. Looks like the crowd kind of dispersed in a way with several people running away, but you can still see the water bottles being thrown. And it looks like the crowd is actually moving closer and closer to the officers right now. Just throwing, oh my gosh, it looks like some type of, it was a flare. A flare was just thrown in the air. Now more crowds are moving in the other direction. Now you can see smoke. Smoke is right in the center there. I'm not sure if our photog Rudy has a shot of that, but you can see smoke there. You can see officers now moving the crowd down. They are walking toward the crowd. They are moving the crowd down. They are telling them to move out of the way. You have several people now just running away, scattering away, rushing out of the area, but officers are actively moving forward here in this fluid situation as people continue to yell and chant George Floyd's name. We have a strong line here. I'm looking at a young lady who is a part of the protest, who's actually looks like she is keeping her friends at a distance from the officers, urging them to maintain a peaceful protest. So we also just heard someone on a speaker saying, do not provoke the police, and just maintaining and trying to maintain a peaceful protest. So it is definitely getting a little more, I don't want to use the term rowdy by any means, but emotions are definitely high here. And we've seen these emotions high, clear across the U.S. throughout all of our protests that we have seen in different parts of the United States. And this is what is happening here in Las Vegas right now. Now, it doesn't look like the officers actually moved too far away from their initial stance. Now they've just moved, I want to say, maybe a few hundred feet to just start moving the crowd down toward the opposite end, which is what they've continued to try to do. We have people asking right now if anyone is hurt. People are jumping over fences, trying to move out of the way. So, Jackie, it is definitely a fluid situation here. Emotions are extremely high. Some people are acting extremely peaceful. Others are just really saying, please say George Floyd's name, and asking the officers to kneel in his name. We are still seeing that, and now we're also seeing the crowds disperse again and running. I have a young lady saying stop throwing stuff, urging the crowd to stop throwing items at the officers. And pardon me for the language that you might be hearing.
Yeah, Kalyna, I do want to ask you, we've kind of been hearing a voice, it sounds like over a loudspeaker. Is that a police officer talking on a microphone or a megaphone, or is that a protester? And I don't know if you can tell, obviously it's loud and it's super active.
Jackie, that's a protester. It's not an officer. We heard officers earlier telling the crowd to move back, but the person that you were just hearing, who I was just by, is actually one of the protesters. Just like I've heard other protesters urge their counterparts and their colleagues here and their peers to maintain the peace and stay peaceful. So as soon as that gentleman on the microphone saw water bottles being thrown, and also other people seeing those water bottles being thrown at the officers, they urged them to stop. They started shouting on the loudspeaker and just really raising their voices to keep it peaceful. So it looks like now the crowd is somewhat settling down a little bit, Jackie, from what I can see. But it definitely is something that is going to continue for a while.
Yeah, Kalyna, right now, the shot that we're looking at, we see protesters, their arms linked. It looks like they're standing in a line facing the police officers. I assume that's what you're seeing as well.
Yeah, I actually moved my location just to take a look at that, and I can see that there was another water bottle that was thrown pretty close to an officer. But yes, they are linked. Their arms are linked. They have signs that say, "I can't breathe," say his name. They're maintaining a distance between them and the officers. Before, I saw some of the protesters very, very close to the officers, pretty much just face to face. Right now it looks like there's a little bit of distance, and a lot of the protesters, like I mentioned before, really urging everyone to just stay calm and stay peaceful. The amount of people yelling at the other protesters, telling them to stop throwing water bottles, is clear across this area.
Kalyna, thank you so much for that reporting. We're going to get back to Austin Carter now. And Austin, please confirm for us that you are safe and let us know what happened with that situation. Okay, I see your thumb up, and that is a good sign.
Yeah, Jackie, me and my photographer Stephanie, we are doing as best as we can right now, but it was a very scary moment. Out of the blue, there was this faint odor in the air, and then all of a sudden, people just started running. People were getting trampled left and right. My photographer and I, unfortunately, we got separated at one point. And it's incredibly scary to have to be in a situation like that, because you cannot stop running. You have to keep going. People are just going full force. But this is where we're looking at now. We've seen these officers have continued to move down Fremont Street. I'm going to step out of the way so Stephanie can get you a better shot here. You can see they're right here. They're in that tactical gear. I mean, we're right along that police line. And yeah, we've really been seeing folks, they have been throwing those water bottles at these officers, even as far back as the nearby intersection. So we've been seeing that just kind of repeatedly happening over and over here. Of course, some of the protesters certainly upset about that, screaming at people not to be throwing water bottles at these officers and trying to taunt anyone and to keep this peaceful. Clearly, though, that has not happened. As Kalyna Astrinos was talking about earlier, those crowds would continuously disperse at times, just out of the blue. Folks would just start running. Unfortunately, we are a little bit far back for our own safety as well, so we're not sure what may have prompted any of those crowds to suddenly start running, but you can understand some of the tension. You can understand some of the tension out here with these protesters throwing these water bottles continuously at these officers. So again, you're taking a look here right at the line. We're at 8th and Fremont. This is where you just see an entire wall of Metro Police officers just standing out here blocking off this area.
So Austin,
we haven't seen
Yeah, to your knowledge, the reason that people were running was because of those water bottles being thrown. Have you seen anything else? We saw smoke in the air just about 10 minutes ago. Have you seen smoke? Have you seen anything else that would give people reason to run, basically?
No, we haven't. You know, we were a little bit far back from those protesters. That's how we were able to see those water balls being thrown, actually from the position that they were, closer towards that intersection. And that was what was really scary, is it really was just out of the blue. Everyone just started running, and, you know, everyone not really knowing what's going on. If they maybe had deployed something, we're not sure. Looks like protesters are taking a knee right now here. And now you can really see that wall of Metro police officers there in full gear there. Some of them even have helmets on as well, as you can see.
Austin, give us a moment right now.
Yeah.
I see these protesters, some on their knee. We have seen this. We saw this last night on the Strip and across the country where protesters are taking a knee as a symbol of what happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis just days ago. And what are you hearing from protesters out there? It sounds like they were chanting something. We now see protesters with their arms in the air as well.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, Jackie. Again, this is something we have seen across the country with these protests. And of course, we've also seen that violence with these protests happening across the country. But, you know, as we talked about in some of the earlier shows from the folks who did speak with out here, they were out here for peace. They wanted this to be a peaceful demonstration and really just to honor the, life and legacy, of George Floyd and everything that happened and anyone who has been impacted by any sort of police violence. So again, we haven't seen any more water bottles being thrown out here. We haven't seen any more of that resistance or pushback from any of those officers. But as you saw earlier when my photographer and I got separated, that can change literally in an instant. So we really could be any moment now from another water bottle being flown through the air here, or these officers continuing to push back this crowd here. They have been asking people to disperse. Clearly, that is not happening here. So we are going to stay out here. I know my colleague Kalyna is out here as well. We're trying to stay as safe as possible here to bring you the very latest as this moment in history really unfolds in real time.
Absolutely. Austin, just very quickly, remind me of exactly where you are downtown. What are sort of your cross streets?
All right, we're on Fremont in between 8th and 7th, so we are literally exactly across the street from where this all began here at the Container Park downtown. So the direction you're looking at, you are looking to the east. So these officers are blocking any of these protesters from heading eastbound on Fremont. They've been pushing them back ever so slightly, it seems, from 8th here, possibly back to 7th here. So we're right in downtown, across the street from the downtown Container Park, and this entire area is really full of folks here protesting out here in downtown Las Vegas tonight.
Okay, Austin, thank you. And it sounds like we actually have some video from earlier with your situation. You said that bottle of water sort of came out of nowhere. This is the moment it happened, this just moments ago. Austin, his photographer, another one of our coworkers, this 3-person crew tonight, they got separated for moments. You can see Stephanie, the photographer, step to the side near this fence. She had to put her camera down, but that's a terrifying moment, watching all of those protesters sprinting, signs in hand, and like Austin said, that's a scary moment. That's not a moment you want to be in, and we are just thankful that you guys are safe. And once again, I mean, all of these Las Vegas leaders, Las Vegas Mayor Carolyn Goodman speaking out tonight ahead of these protests, saying, invoking the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., saying that she wanted everyone in Las Vegas to have the right to protest, to be able to make their voices heard with all of these injustices that are happening in our country, but she wanted everyone to do so peacefully. Sounds like from right now, we're looking at fairly peaceful protests, but tensions are obviously high in Las Vegas right now. Let's get up to Ross DiMattei in the sky. Ross, I'm seeing hands in the sky, signs up in the air. What are you seeing?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of people now gathered here at 6th Street and Bridger Avenue. This group has been on the move now. We've kind of been monitoring 2 different large groups, but just from our point of view, it looks like this is the larger group of protesters. Just look at the size of that group. They've now taken over that entire intersection at 6th Street and Bridger Avenue. And this is one of those periods where they have now stopped, and I would imagine that they are chanting and holding out those signs and expressing their frustration at this point. But we've seen this group consistently on the move, but this is definitely the larger of the 2 groups now, and Metro has been kind of responding to where those different groups have been moving. But we now see that this group is heading east on Bridger Avenue and has stopped at 6th and Bridger and has basically shut down that intersection. We actually saw a couple cars there who did not see this protest coming and were trying to get through, but have now been caught up in this protest as well. Jackie?
Yeah, Ross, you definitely have one of the best views for us now. If we can kind of zoom out, are there any other streets? We know that Metro Police were definitely blocking off the Fremont Street experience, not wanting protesters to get into that area clearly. But are there any other areas, streets that they are, very clearly marking off right now and trying to keep protesters out of, if you can see that?
Yeah, Jackie, you mentioned the Fremont Street experience. That's where we've seen that line of Metro officers kind of holding their ground and not letting the protesters by there. That's where we've been monitoring that second group of protesters, and this might be it here, but we've also been looking at this line of Metro police vehicles that has been lined up there now for, I would say, 15 or 20 minutes. But that second group I mentioned was really the group of protesters that kind of lagged behind and stayed at Fremont Street and seemed to be a little less active than that larger group we showed you. But definitely two distinguished groups of protesters now, and Metro seems to have close eyes on both of them. We've been sharing the skies over downtown Las Vegas with one Metro chopper, if not two, while they were making that substitution and going to refuel. But Metro's got a close eye on it like we do here from Chopper 13.
Absolutely. People across downtown Las Vegas protesting now. We are going to get back to anchor Kalyna Astrinos right now. And Kalyna, let us know first where exactly you are now.
So we moved to the opposite side of, I believe, 8th and Fremont. Or no, I'm sorry, 8th and Carson. But I want to let you know that if you look ahead, we have that big crowd, but also when our camera guy is kind of moving down, this stretches all the way down to about 6th Street. So this is pretty much, this protest is spanning between 9th and 6th Street right now. So it just continues to grow every 30 minutes or so. We just see more and more people coming down in this area. For a little while, it did feel a little hectic. We did have several people throwing water bottles at some of the officers, but again, the protesters were telling them to stop doing that. We saw some smoke earlier today, not quite sure where exactly that came from, but for the most part, these protesters are actually encouraging each other to keep the peace and maintain the calm here. But for a while, we did see a lot of them taking a knee, like I mentioned before, asking officers to also take a knee as well and say George Floyd's name. Of course, emotions are so high. You know, this is something that a lot of African Americans, a lot of Black Americans here in the United States have been fighting for so long. So this is a huge group of people here that just want their voices heard, with such a diverse group of people with the same purpose here. Like I mentioned before, we have people who are kids that are here with their parents to see this unfold. And also we have people who are white, who are Black, who are Asian, that are all here urging for peace and also wanting justice because of what happened to George Floyd, because of what happened to Eric Garner, because of what we saw with Ahmaud Arbery. So this is something that has been continuing for a while, and this is something that the people here at Container Park would like to see stop. Right now, it's actually getting very, very quiet. It seems like a lot of the protesters have kind of left some of this area. You can see this big gap in front of us. Some, though, still right up to where the officers are, directly right in front of them. Officers have been moving forward slowly, but for the past 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so, we've seen them kind of stay in that one spot, just in that line, not really approaching the protesters at all. And we can see several right now moving to the other direction, moving to the other side. So I think we might go ahead and take off from this area. We did see an ambulance drive by earlier, but it looks like they were going to a different spot. But now that everyone is walking in a different direction, we're going to follow the crowd and see where they're heading to, and also just keep an eye on this situation here right in front of these officers. Jackie?
Yeah, Kalyna, thank you for that report. We do want to remind everyone that Sheriff Joe Lombardo spoke earlier tonight around 5 o'clock, addressed our city, and said that he wanted everyone to remain peaceful as well. You'll remember that he tweeted out May 28th, just a couple days ago, that the death of Mr. Floyd was deeply disturbing. He said the officers' actions and inaction are inconsistent with the training and protocols of our profession and the LVMPD. He said that he can assure the Las Vegas community that the department will strive each day to continue to build your trust. And something that I mentioned last night ahead of those protests last night, or yesterday afternoon around 2 o'clock when those protests began, I watched officers speaking to a group of protesters. They echoed Joe Lombardo's remarks, and they said that they were on the protesters' side in terms of wanting to keep them safe and being able and helping them make their voices heard and just allowing them to protest safely. But of course, we watched last night 80 protesters ultimately were arrested. 12 officers were injured, and protests did turn violent. And once again, they said that it was a select group. They believed that it was agitators that came into the protest later in the afternoon, joined an otherwise peaceful protest, and damaged some police cars and caused some violence. And so that is exactly what they're trying to avoid tonight. Let's get back to 13 Action News anchor Ross DiMattei, who is up in the sky right now. Ross, we're seeing, of course, that heavy police presence, and it looks like many protesters as well. Or are those police cars? I need to put my glasses on.
Yeah, Jackie, this is the scene here at 4th and Carson Street, I believe. I apologize. We're dealing with a bit of a situation. Our photographer, Jose, noticed what he thought might have been a green-colored laser pointer, which obviously is extremely, extremely dangerous to point that at a helicopter. And we just got confirmation from Metro that Metro Police has also noticed from their chopper a green laser pointer being pointed in the direction of both of our choppers. And they believe they may know the individual responsible, but they are currently pursuing that person. Again, extremely dangerous. And so that's what we were dealing with. But again, this is the scene at 4th and Carson. This is a large gathering that has gathered, and you could see there as we go behind the Bank of America building, I'll just describe it. There's a line of Metro Police vehicles and then a line of Metro Police officers, and they've together formed like a 90-degree angle where they're kind of holding a corner against where those protesters have now formed. So there's now a corner of police vehicles and police officers in close quarters with those protesters there. Again, it's been largely peaceful, except for this one report of a laser pointer that Metro is now addressing. But that's kind of what we're seeing here now, is the crowd seems to be moving away now from 4th and Carson. Jackie?
Yeah, Ross, that is pretty scary. We do want to say that that kind of laser pointer, very dangerous, also a federal crime. So that is very serious. We hope that you guys remain safe up there. We need you guys to remain safe up there. And just give us an update when you can. Let's get back on the ground right now, though, with Austin Carter. Austin, okay, we do not have Austin right now. We do have Kalyna Astrinos. Kalyna, tell us what you're seeing now.
Jackie, for the last 10 minutes or so, it's pretty much remained the same. I just took a walk down the street, though, to see what the crowd looked like there. It kind of seems like there are different gatherings now in different locations. So we have a crowd that's kind of gathered around 7th and Fremont, and then we also have a crowd gathered around 8th as well. But just several signs. There's a certain smell in the air, which I'm not familiar with, and I can't really pinpoint what it is, but that came right after the smoke. And now you can see some people up. Officers again are pushing the crowd forward a little bit. That is the sound of someone's motor scooter right now. Not quite sure. But I'm sorry, I'm having such a difficult time hearing you. But there's a line of officers here. They have moved forward once again. Now the chanting is getting a little bit louder. Now they are directly in front of these officers here holding their signs. It almost feels like it is nose to nose or just face to face, making direct eye contact with some of these officers and just pleading for them to say George Floyd's name and just chanting Black Lives Matter. But they did take a significant step forward. So where they were initially was right under the Fremont Street District sign. But now you can see they've made several steps forward. But the crowd on our end really has kind of scattered. We saw people running down the alley. We saw people going toward the other side. It seems like every time officers move forward, the crowd decides to follow what they're asking and kind of move out of the way. Some stay, but some do go. So for the most part, aside from the water bottles being thrown here, it doesn't seem to be getting out of control by any means. It just seems like these individuals here have their emotions high and just really want to have their voices heard.
Kalyna, we are going to get to Austin Carter in a moment, but I do want to ask you really quickly. It got super loud there for a second, and you mentioned what we were hearing, but it was kind of cutting out a little bit. So what exactly were we hearing just moments ago?
Oh, so that sound, it almost sounded like a motor. It was someone's motor scooter. Okay, I don't know what just happened. Everyone is running right now. Oh my God. I don't know what happened. Someone just fell to the ground. Okay. I'm not quite sure what happened. I need to okay, the officers are grabbing someone right now. I need to find our photog. I need to make sure he's not in the middle of this, but I'm not quite sure what exactly just happened. People started running. People fell on the ground. Now glass is being broken. They continue to throw things at officers right now. Officers continue to move forward.
Okay, yeah, Kalyna,
like
we did see officers in some kind of a scuffle with a protester. We're seeing bottles up in the air. Just want to make sure, are you okay? Are you safe?
So I'm pretty much behind this crowd, but our camera guy is right up front. Okay, I see him now. So he's okay as well. We've just been trying to kind of maintain our distance. We also want to be respectful to the protesters as well and give them the space that they need, and also give the officers the space they need as well. So when you see like a crowd obviously disperse and run the way they have, based on what we've seen in other parts of the U.S., you get a little worried, but thankfully it doesn't seem like anyone was arrested here. It just seems like there was that little scuffle that you said. But everyone here now is quieting down a little bit, and they all just have their cell phones out. They are just capturing these moments right now, Jackie.
Absolutely. Well, keep your distance, stay safe, Kalyna, and we're going to get to Austin Carter now. And Austin, let's see what your shot is showing us. Austin, yeah, tell me what you're looking at.
Yeah, Jackie, so we were in the middle of all that. We have now moved over to Carson and 7th here. We had to come back to our vehicle, kind of gather our belongings and recollect ourselves out here. But you're taking a look. This is towards the area where Kalyna Astrinos is here downtown. As you can see, it's much quieter out here on this part. This is really where we saw a lot of those protesters kind of wrapping up just a little bit ago, before they turned down Fremont Street and then headed towards 7th. Yeah, so definitely a lot more peaceful here on this side of things. Clearly, we understand that there's a lot more happening down on Fremont Street, but we have been seeing a lot of people dispersing, kind of leaving this area. You can see a few of them over there on the sidewalk, walking by with some of those signs, rather. And we've been seeing the helicopters up above. Metro Police definitely with a close eye on what's going on out here tonight. We can see them up ahead. Steph, if you could get that shot real quick over the El Cortez as that chopper continues to circle this area. Luckily, we've been able to see traffic is able to get through this area once again. As you know, folks are pretty much taking over the entire street during all of this. Certainly a serious situation out here. Again, those water bottles being thrown. We saw that firsthand. I know Kalyna is seeing that as well down on Fremont Street, of course. Looks like possibly things may be wrapping up here with this protest, though, as we start to see more people head out of the area. Back to you, Jackie.
Yeah, Austin, I want to ask you just really quickly. We are seeing a lot of protesters, scattered protests in the area you are in. Have you spoken to anyone? I mean, are they just regathering, recouping kind of themselves right now, or are they heading out? Are people starting to leave?
Yeah, so that's something we noticed. It seemed like some people would, want to go and be in the middle of it and then kind of fall back a little bit. But as I mentioned earlier, we had seen people kind of come in and they had water bottles and food and supplies for people that were out here. So we've kind of seen people pretty much take like somewhat of a water break, really, where they'll kind of go back towards Container Park and just kind of, talk, have a drink, and then just pretty much be back in the middle of it protesting. So we know, it is pretty warm out here, of course. Definitely didn't want anyone passing out or anything like that. So yeah, we're starting to see those people disperse right now. Of course, they've got their signs out here as well, Jackie.
Yeah, absolutely, Austin. Thank you. Many of these protesters have been out on the street for more than 2.5 hours at this point. Many of them marching around much of that time. Let's get up to Ross DiMattei in the sky. And Ross, can you give us an update on this green laser situation? Have you learned anything more about what was happening in there?
Jackie, we have not heard any more about the laser pointer. The last we heard was that Metro was aware of it and that they had been dealing with it as well. And they thought that they had identified the person who might be responsible and were pursuing that person. But we have not heard any update on that front since. But we can update you on these two crowds. We've told you we've been following basically two large groups that have been protesting in different areas over the past hour or so. It looks like those two groups are now on a bit of a collision course. One of the two groups now heading for the other group. We believe it's at 4th and Fremont Street. That's where you're looking right now. This is kind of near where the El Cortez is and right near the Fremont Street Experience. But that second group is now moving towards that area as well, which would unite those two large groups of protesters once again. And they've been fragmented now for some time. So that could spell out some potential problems for Metro, although largely what we've seen from up here in the sky and Chopper 13 has been largely peaceful protests, other than what you've heard from Kalyna and Austin, who are on the ground and seeing some of those water bottles being thrown. But from what we're seeing here, largely peaceful. But again, these two groups are expected to meet here now, as one of them is on the move, and they're going to meet about at 4th and Fremont.
Okay, Ross, thank you for that. I'm glad you guys are safe in the skies. And we're taking a look right now with Kalyna. And Kalyna, it looks like your group is it looks calmer in the picture right now, although we're still hearing some chanting, it sounds like, and people yelling. What are they saying?
I can't repeat what they're saying, but for the most part, earlier today we were hearing them say Black Lives Matter, say George Floyd's name, take a knee. So far, it has. There's still a massive amount of people here, but compared to what we saw earlier, it seems like a lot of people have kind of moved in different directions here. Toward the left of me, you can kind of see more of a crowd here, and it looks like they are pretty much right up against some of the officers there in that corner. We also have some people up on the balcony kind of looking down at the scene as well. Behind us on the other side, we just had a police car zoom down the street. You can hear the sirens there as well. I'm not sure if that is related to this or if they're heading into a different direction. But for the most part, this has kind of filtered out just slightly. If you look at the ground in some areas, you can see some of the water bottles that were thrown down, some of the leftover items that were thrown. But for the most part, pardon that, it has kind of moved in different directions here. So again, officers have actually maintained the spot that they were in for the past 30 minutes or so. They have not moved forward again from what I've seen, but they have moved forward significantly from where they were initially. Again, just kind of pushing the crowd back a little bit. It seems like every time they do that, it gets a tiny bit more chaotic here. But for the most part, again, these protesters are being relatively peaceful. They're just asking for these officers to hear them, to recognize them, hear their voices, take a knee for George Floyd, and just kind of coming face to face with these officers here to make their voices heard.
Kalyna, have you heard anything in the last 20 or so minutes from officers? I know that when we first came on the air about 45 minutes ago, you had been hearing calls from officers for the past hour saying that they were, moving to arrest people in some cases because of unlawful assembly. So have you heard anything more from officers? We know last night we heard, about 3 warnings before they started pressing into those protesters and making arrests. So have you heard any more from police?
No, actually I haven't. I haven't heard that in about an hour or so. Actually, maybe like 45 minutes or so. It's been about 45 minutes since they've said that. Initially, they were doing that a lot when they were right under the Fremont Street sign, just urging people to move back. And what they were telling them is that if they do something, they will be arrested. But then for a little while, they were telling these protesters they have about 5 minutes before they need to move. And I believe that was right before officers moved forward. So they gave them a warning saying, we need you to move back, we need you to move back. And sure enough, the ones that did not move back, that's when officers kind of moved forward, and that's when they came a little closer in contact. But like we saw yesterday, and we heard from Metro last night, that the people who were being arrested yesterday were people who they believed were violating the law and making situations unsafe. Right now, although we have seen those water bottles being thrown at the officers and stuff, officers have not taken any action when it comes to those water bottles being thrown. And for the most part right now, what we are just seeing is a lot of chanting and a lot of people just really saying, George Floyd, George Floyd. You can hear this clear across. One person starts saying George Floyd, the entire group starts saying George Floyd. So this is a very, very fluid situation. Emotions, like I've been saying, are extremely high. I actually walked up to someone to see if they wanted to go on camera and let me know why they were here. They declined, but they continued on and kept on chanting George Floyd. Earlier today, I spoke to someone who mentioned she had an 8-year-old son. She lives in this area. She has an 8-year-old son, and she wanted to come here to show him that his future will be okay, and she will be fighting for justice for him for the rest of his life. So a lot of people are here for very different reasons. A lot of different backgrounds are here for the same reason. But they want peace and they want justice and they want to fight against injustices that they've seen over the years. So really this all coming after the death of George Floyd, but this is a situation that we have seen play out over the years in so many different locations.
Absolutely. Kalyna, we're actually going to bring up some video from the situation that you were in just about 10 or 15 minutes ago, where you and your photographer Rudy got separated. You can see people just sprinting out of their way there, and these officers, it looked like they have someone, it looks like a kind of a scuffle with a protester, and then these other protesters sort of moving in on the officers and the one protester. So that was the situation, once again, that Kalyna was describing about 10 or 15 minutes ago. And again, our other reporter on the scene, Austin Carter, had his own moment, his own scare, where there were water bottles being thrown, sort of a surprise water bottle being thrown near him, running out of the way. Austin, you're joining us back now. Where are you? Okay. Where are you now, Austin?
Yeah, Jackie, so we're at 7th and Carson. We're on the west side of the container park here. So again, as we were talking earlier about those groups of protesters kind of dispersing, well, that's what we're seeing. Now we're continuing to see a lot of people, weren't able to park in this area. I mean, we were talking about what appeared to be thousands of people taking over the streets here of downtown Las Vegas outside Container Park. This whole area was a completely different scene right around 7 o'clock this evening. So we're seeing a lot of them probably now having to make their way towards some of the other parking areas here in downtown. A lot of them heading south here.
Okay, Austin, we're moving back to
Yep.
Kalyna shot real quick. Kalyna, tell me what you're seeing now.
So we were just standing here, and just about 1 minute ago, a huge crowd just started rushing this way. People were falling on the ground, tripping over each other. They all stood up again. I didn't see any officers moving forward, so I'm not quite sure what type of scuffle it was. It's a little hard to see from where I'm at. But there is some type of activity happening toward the right of your screen here. Not quite sure exactly what it was, but it did get a little chaotic there with people running. I pulled my photographer out of the way. We have Astrid Mendez here with us as well. So we're all trying to keep us safe and a little as close as we can, but also maintaining our distance as well, just in case. But it just seemed like that little scuffle that we saw has calmed down at this moment for the most part. But it does seem as if something is going on toward the right of where the protest is. I'm going to kind of walk in that direction and see if I can see something. Yeah, more people are starting to run away again. I'm not quite sure why. Ooh, I'm so sorry. Excuse me. They're again chanting George Floyd, but I'm not. The officers from where I'm at seem to be in the same exact location. So I'm not quite sure what happened exactly, but something definitely happened to make people run away the way they did. But again, right now, you're just seeing a line of people right in front of the officers here, just face to face, chanting George Floyd's name.
Okay. Ross, let's get back up to you in Chopper 13. Just moments ago, you were describing these
Message
two
on
groups of protesters sort of making their way toward each other, possibly converging. So, Ross, do you have an update? Looks like we're seeing just a massive group, but have those two groups of protesters met up at this point? Have they converged?
Yeah, Jackie, it appears like they have. This is 4th and Fremont, and it appears that this is the majority of the protesters that are left out here in downtown Las Vegas. You can see that it is a sizable protesting group. This is hundreds of people, and like you said, those two groups that had been fractured for a decent amount over the last hour, it appears is now together. You see the El Cortez there. This is the area of 4th and Fremont Street. There are some other smaller groups in the area, but again, this is the large majority of the protesters that remain now gathered here at 4th and Fremont. And what's interesting about this, tough to tell from this angle, but as we circle around, hopefully you'll get a better sense, but it seems like the whole crowd is now focused on the center of where this group is gathered now, and there are a couple protesters that are doing some sort of demonstration, but at least have the stage in front of all of these protesters that are now stopped on 4th and Fremont Street. We're keeping a close eye on it. Again, haven't seen too much craziness in terms of people dispersing suddenly or moving or clashing with police, but this is where the large group has gathered now at 4th and Fremont Street. Jackie?
Yeah, Ross, you have quite the picture up there from the sky right now of this crowd. Again, I mean, we just have to take a step back and realize what a surreal moment this is for Las Vegas. I mean, last night we saw protesters taking to the Las Vegas Strip. I've never seen anything like what I saw last night. And once again, the third night now of protests here in Las Vegas with just a massive group in downtown. And it is interesting that those two groups have now met up, and it looks like they are making their way down. Is that 4th Street that they're making their way down now, Ross?
It's hard to tell, Jackie.
Okay.
That, I believe, is 4th Street, where we're now seeing some of that crowd start to move down. But the majority of them are just staying in place and listening again to those few protesters that are in the middle and seem to be leading this demonstration.
Okay.
You can see them there.
Ross,
with
I'm
the
going to cut in real quick. We are going to go back to Kalyna, Astrinos. And Kalyna, we are just watching protesters. We're seeing water in the air. Tell us what you're seeing.
Jackie, yes, Jackie. So we have SWAT. It looks like we have SWAT now. I'm not quite sure if I could see that, but we just saw protesters take some of the water bottles, and it looked like they were pouring them on the officers. After that happened, it looked like they decided to move back, and then a huge crowd just started running back. Of course, another crowd stayed forward. You can see those water bottles being thrown in the air in that direction. I believe I just saw a shoe in that direction as well. People have their hands up saying, "Hands up, don't shoot, hands up, don't shoot." It seemed like there was a little scuffle as well on the right-hand side. We also have on the left-hand side of your screen here, we have people with their hands up saying, "Hands up, don't shoot, hands up, don't shoot." Toward the middle, we have some type of activity as well, but it does look like they have extra officers here in this direction. I'm having a really tough time seeing, but
yeah,
this
Kalyna,
crowd
I was going to say it may be difficult. It may be difficult for you to be able to see right now, but from Chopper 13, we can see exactly what Ross was describing. Just sort of a large circle of protesters, and it looks like there may be a few protesters who are sort of in the center of that group. I see one, what looks like a man in a white T-shirt, who really is sort of at the center of that group. But do you feel sort of a sense of unity among the protesters in terms of, like, are they chanting together? Is there a sense that they're all watching or listening to one person?
I'm sorry, Jackie. I moved my location just to take a look at who was actually here. We actually have more police officers here with more gear here as well. The line of officers is actually growing. The amount of people that were here wasn't large for a little while, but now it seems like more and more people are kind of crowding back into this area as they continue to come face to face with some of the officers here.
And
So
Kalyna,
far,
it's
last
interesting because
couple
that is
minutes or so
exactly what Ross was describing. He was describing from Chopper 13 these two large groups of protesters who were sort of on this path to converge. And now it does appear that the protesters are all in one central location downtown. Let's get back to Austin Carter, who sort of has another view again of this one large group of protesters that are downtown right now.
Yeah, Jackie, so we actually moved a little bit closer to the intersection here. We are at 7th and Fremont Street. This is where we have been seeing some of those protesters then kind of running back here from this area. Now, if you can take a look at where we are here, we're kind of behind this fencing here that kind of blocks off the intersection here. But this is kind of where we've been seeing those crowds just all of a sudden having to run back. If you can remember from some of our earlier live shots and the ones you've been seeing from Kalyna, Astrinos, just down, if you look a little bit to our east here where you see all those flashing police lights, that is where that wall of police officers is being met by those protesters. That's where we've been seeing those water bottles flying. But you can still see this is a very large crowd here, kind of clustered though, just nestled really to the east of 7th and Fremont as protesters continue to stay out here this evening. So we'll keep you posted on the very latest as soon as we get more here. We're going to keep monitoring this situation, but it looks for the most part right now peaceful. But again, we are kind of on the backside of things, or backside of all these protesters here. So we'll definitely be monitoring and waiting to see if any of those crowds start running again. We'll be right here for that, Jackie.
Yeah, Austin, it's interesting right now because we have another shot from Chopper 13. It looks like those protesters are once again on the move, as they have been for nearly 3 hours now. And Ross, you have the best eyes. You've got the best shot in town right now. So tell us where these protesters look like they're heading now.
Yeah, I don't know about the best eyes, but definitely the best view from where we're at. And I can tell you that this group has started moving again, like you said, Jackie. So they are now working their way towards the Fremont Street experience. They just passed the intersection of Fremont and Las Vegas Boulevard, obviously an iconic part of downtown Las Vegas. And you see the signs that are so commonly associated with where the Fremont Street experience begins. And we've seen, as they've made this route throughout the course of the night, the protesters tend to take that turn there heading southbound on Las Vegas Boulevard, and it looks like once again they are doing that, not heading onto the Fremont Street experience, but absolutely on the move once again. And we'll see where they end up as we continue to track them here from the sky in Chopper 13.
Ross, thank you so much. My eye is not the best here tonight either, but we're doing the best we can. We do want to update everyone on the situation in Reno right now. At the top of our broadcast tonight, we mentioned that Reno was the first state, or the first city in Nevada to have a curfew. We saw a video of protesters smashing the windows at City Hall in Reno, now under curfew, and the National Guard has been activated in Reno as well. So we, once again, in Las Vegas, we're seeing a larger group of protesters than we have in the past 2 nights. But to put this in context, we are just one city across the country right now experiencing another night of unrest as these protests just continue across the country. Many of the demonstrations in other cities have turned violent, and that is exactly what leaders in our community have set out to avoid tonight. They do not want to see property damaged or anyone get injured tonight. Again, last night's protests on the Las Vegas Strip, seeing 80 protesters arrested, 12 officers injured. And so far tonight, we have seen water bottles in the air, but really no other signs of violence. And let's get one last brief check with Kalyna. Astrinos, we've got about 3 minutes left in our broadcast right now. And Kalyna, give us one kind of last wrap of what you're seeing.
Oh gosh, the crowd is still here. Again, they're right up against or face to face with the officers there. Like we mentioned before, emotions are so high clear across the U.S. and you can see it and you can feel it here in Las Vegas, here on Fremont Street, and it's just a very fluid situation. We have seen people running. We have seen people take a knee here and say, you know, George Floyd's name. So the emotions and the roller coaster of emotions here can definitely be felt. A lot of the things that some of these protesters are chanting, hands up, don't shoot, no justice, no peace, say George Floyd's name, Black Lives Matter, and they are right looking directly at these officers that are still lined up. For the last 20 minutes or so, 10 minutes or so, we haven't seen any type of running or any activity like that. The water bottle throwing has relatively stopped for the most part. I actually just spoke to someone who said she was here with a group of people, a group of Black Americans, to make sure everyone here is protesting peacefully. And aside from a few incidents that we have seen, it hasn't been like what we've seen in downtown Los Angeles, like what we've seen in Minneapolis and what we've seen in Chicago.
Kalyna, Austin, Ross, thank you so much for being our eyes out in the field and up in the sky tonight. We do want to read off this tweet from Las Vegas Metro Police Department Bolden Area Command. They say Bolden is proud of the Las Vegas community for their efforts to conduct peaceful protests. We uphold the rights of all citizens to protest. We appreciate all citizens, community leaders, and political figures who have supported the right to peacefully protest. We are Vegas strong and walk together in unity. You were watching Unrest in Las Vegas. This has been the third night of protests here in Las Vegas. We will continue to bring you live coverage as these protests unfold during tonight. And when we're not on air, we are always online at KTNV.com and your favorite streaming device. We will be back on air at 11 o'clock tonight to bring you the latest on protests across the valley.